Many of us grow up dreaming of a fancy job in a big company in the biggest cities in the world. There's something about that prestige and supposed financial security that this life promises that makes ambitious people like myself really drawn to it. But what if I told you that this path is actually a trap that will keep you poor forever? I don't expect you to believe me, so in this video I will prove that by showing some actual calculations for just how hard it is to build wealth in this day and age using this traditional path. And was the same calculations for an alternative, which I think is a much better lifestyle and also allows you to build wealth much faster. So I graduated at one of the best universities in the world. I was set for a very safe and a very great career. Now, honestly, most people would do anything to get. But then when I started looking at things practically and I started just doing some basic math, like I started looking at the cost of everything in the world. I started looking at the rate of inflation, at the cost of housing, how it's always going up. And I started to feel sort of hopeless. Like somehow I had this amazing job, this amazing career, yet somehow I was barely able to save any money at the end of the day. Like it was not at all what I had sort of been promised. And this is the reality of most people who fall into and who believe what the system has told us is the best way to get rich. And I could just say that and leave it at that, but I'm actually gonna do is I'm actually gonna very practically show you the difference between doing the good boy style of like working this 9-to-5 job until you're 60 versus an alternative, the alternative that I now have, that I have discovered, which is being a remote worker or an online business owner, where basically the idea is that you're leveraging something called geographic arbitrage, where you're earning based on the income level of one location, so these high income locations like the US or Europe, but you're living in places where the cost of living is much lower. And when you do this and you essentially live in multiple locations around the world, that basically allows you to not only optimize your life to live exactly what you want, the life that you want to live, but also this allows you to, in most cases, also optimize for taxes and to not have to pay taxes at all if you either base yourself in a location that has low taxes or you base yourself out of a couple of different locations around the world so that you never trigger the tax rules of any given country. So that is what I'm going to be comparing to you in this video. And so for the purposes of this, we are assuming that you as a remote digital nomad, which by the way, I'm just using the word digital nomad as like a catch-all term for this sort of remote lifestyle. It doesn't have to mean a digital nomad in the traditional sense where you're essentially like moving every month or something like that. I don't actually think that is how you should do this, but I'm just using that as a term to sort of refer to this like remote work lifestyle, like living in a couple of places around the world. And I'm just going to show you a very precise financial calculation, which is going to show you just how much quicker you are going to be able to build wealth living like this versus doing this like high prestige, like working for a big company kind of thing. Because the thing you need to understand is that if you work for a big company as a corporate employee, you are going to have to live in one of the highest cost of living places in the world. Most likely, if you're in finance, like I used to be, like pretty much you're going to be in London, you're going to be in New York, these kind of places. And they might be great places to live. Maybe that's exactly where you want to live. And that's a different conversation. But just in terms of finances, I just want to show you the impact that this is going to have and how much this good salary actually won't get you that far in reality. So for this example, we're just going to compare someone working a corporate job in London, and I'm just using London because that's what I know, because that was the path that I was on until I sort of found this other path. And then I'm going to show you this digital nomad path. And for this purpose, we're going to assume you earn the same gross income in both locations. And now ostensibly, you might feel like, okay, the same income, that's going to equate to the same lifestyle, same wealth building, all of this. That is what I want to debunk here. Because first, what we need to consider are taxes. If you're living in one of these high tax, high cost Western locations that like to tax all your money, you're going to end up with this net income from this 8,000 of only 5,596. And this is based on the official UK tax calculator. You can check it for yourself. Whereas if you're a digital nomad, where you don't trigger the tax rules of any given country, which is by the way completely legal, you're not breaking any country's rules, or you're simply based out of Dubai, like I am, where the tax rate just happens to be 0. So you can assume that this gross income actually is the exact same as your net income. This is with one little asterisk, because if you happen to be an American, if you're an American citizen, you will still have to pay federal taxes to the US. But even in that case, you have what's called the foreign earned income exclusion. So the first 100,000 that you make, which in this case, this would fall below 100,000 a year, is going to be tax free. By the way, if you want to know how to do this, how I've done it, etc., whatever. I can make separate videos on that if you want. But not only is the net income going to be much lower for the corporate job guy, rent is also going to be much higher. You're going to have to live in London. You're going to have to live in New York, San Francisco, where rent is absolutely crazy. So out of that 5,500, 2,800 on average, and this is based on data from Numbeo, the site that I always use, is going to go to rent. Whereas if you're a digital nomad, you're optimizing for a place where the cost of living is going to be reasonable. Let's say somewhere in Southeast Asia, or something like that. You might imagine paying an average maybe 1,500. Although if you're in Thailand, if you're in Bali, but I'm just assuming that you're not absolutely like going to the cheapest place. You may be even living a little bit, which you can absolutely do with this budget. And then we just make some assumption for other expenses, which again is probably going to be at least double if you're having to live in one of these highest cost of living places. Because the thing with these places, London, New York, as much as they can be great cities, like you are paying a premium for the fact that all the best jobs are there, because all these high earning employees, they have to live there, and that is going to artificially push the prices up. But when you're working remotely, you don't have a reason to be in these places and to pay these premiums. That is where this efficiency comes in. You can save so much more. And at the end, out of that same gross income as a digital nomad, you're gonna end up with 5,900 saved, like net after everything that you can tack onto your savings. Whereas as a corporate employee, for the same income, you're only gonna be left out with 1,596 given these particular assumptions. But now that is not all, because the thing that matters with money is that it's not about how much money you're saving, it's not about how much income you make, it's about how much you're able to save. And eventually you can get to the point where you have built up so much wealth that is invested in either high yield savings account, which right now works really well, or just index funds, where simply the withdrawal rate of like how much you can take out of that investment every single year, because it's growing every single year, is going to exceed how much you need to live. So first, we're just going to assume that you need the same amount saved up. The income that you're going to be required to be completely free is going to be $6,000. And I'm talking about income that you can draw passively from your investments, which would mean, based on this calculation over here, that you would need 1,440,000 saved up and invested in order to draw $6,000 a month completely for free for doing nothing, just from your investment. And if you're a digital nomad, because you're saving this much more, you can do that in 12 years. Whereas with an employee, you're gonna have to do that for 26 years. That's more than double the time that it's gonna take you to save this 1,440,000. So that's 13.6 years less that it's gonna take you to save up enough to be completely free and retire simply by doing this remote work thing, rather than doing the good boy path of being this 9-to-5 employee. But now the stage 3 here is that even this isn't actually fair, because the thing is, when you're a digital nomad and you're optimizing for location, you're not gonna need the same income to be free. You might only need $2,000 a month if you're willing to retire somewhere like Thailand. Whereas as a corporate employee, maybe you've got a mortgage in London, now your family is in London, because that's where you built your entire life. Whereas if you built your entire life in a different location that's much more reasonably priced, you're gonna need much less to live there. So you're gonna need to save much less. You might need to save only 480,000 to retire in Thailand, versus this 1,440,000 to retire in London, which is going to mean that as a digital nomad, you could actually retire in 5.6 years versus 26.3 years if you choose to be a corporate employee. So this is what I mean about how much more efficient this life of living around the world, optimizing for taxes, optimizing for cost of living is. Because a lot of people say like, okay, but I want to be in London, but I want to work this job. Actually, not that many people say that actually, but if you say that, then that is absolutely fine and you can do that. But the thing you need to consider is that, do you want this path so much more that you're willing to work for 26.3 years instead of 5.6 years to have enough to retire? That is the question here. And this brings us to a general idea about wealth that I'm really passionate about. Is that I think if you think about wealth as in just like money, like how much money you have, I think that's the wrong way to look at wealth. I think the right way to look at wealth is how many months of living do I have saved up. A month of living in London might cost you $4,000 a month, whereas a month of living in Thailand might cost you $2,000 a month. So every $4,000 you save, if you have to live in London, that's only 1 month of living that you're saving. Whereas if you live in Thailand, you're saving 2 months of living. And that's not only, again, even taking into account that you can probably save twice as much, three times as much if you're living around the world versus if you're living in one of these super high cost of living, super high tax places. So really, for the same gross income, you might be saving 4 months of living every single month, whereas in in London, you might only save like half a month of living. And that is just another way of looking at this and see like just how much more efficient the second path is. And the other objection that you might have is like, oh, but if I become a digital nomad, then I'll have to live in Thailand and the quality of life there is going to be so much worse. But just let me show you something. This is this website called Numbeo that I often use. They have this like quality of life rankings and these like indices based on like crime data and things like this. These are the numbers for London. The things I want to look at, specifically safety. Let's compare this with Bangkok in Thailand. As you can see, Bangkok is higher on the safety index than London. Bangkok is literally a safer place than London. If you look at other things like quality of life in terms of like convenience, if you've ever been to Bangkok, you will see you can get absolutely the same first world amenities as you could in a city like London, except you don't have to deal with the crime. Now, there are other issues with Bangkok. Air quality is not amazing. And the point of this is not just to compare Bangkok and London, but the big point here is you can actually, in many cases, get higher quality of life in a lot of these cheaper locations compared to these super expensive cities where you're forced to live if you work one of these corporate jobs. So not only can you save a lot more, not only does the money that you save get you much further, but also you get a much better and nicer lifestyle, arguably, again, depending on your preferences. And even though right now I'm not like living cheaply or anything like that, the point is because I understand like I can always go to Chiang Mai, Thailand and live comfortably on $1,000 a month. Even if something happens, even if all my businesses fail, or I get cancelled or anything, I'm always going to have this backup option of this wealth that I've been able to build that can just passively allow me to live as much as I need to figure something else out. So I can always do whatever I want and I never have to be anyone's slave again. And that is the value of this lifestyle. If you want to learn how to do this, that is what this channel is for. Building a life around the world, just talking about the different locations as I discovered them, and of course how to achieve this yourself. So if that resonates with you, I think you might enjoy a lot of the other videos on this channel. In this video, I talk about my experience of being a digital nomad in Thailand for 30 days, sort of the first experience I had of this lifestyle. So if you're curious about Thailand in particular and what it's like over there, you might want to watch that video.